Good evening. We are in Simon Ayin Vav, I believe. Let's get it on screen. Okay, this is a topic we've had in the past several times, probably already. Okay, Be'ez kishalon adam. But a person stumbles and no, he fails at something. So, which of course, a person is always going to fail. Failure is part of life. So, Yeda should also ace. You should know that at that time, u'achana geloso davar latov. It's the reason why he's failing is that it's a preparation to accomplish good things in that area. Yimiska also show you madrega gedola mode. And bizoch at that time, of course, not it doesn't always happen. Perhaps even a minority of times it happens, but it's possible. Be merit at that time to get to a very high madrega kfi gola achet she'etzem mesiso to the as in proportion to the greatness of the sin that the Yetzer is trying to convince him to do, persuade him to do. Kaku goda tov us. So too is the in proportion the greatness of the good he can accomplish or absorb at that time. Im Yahafech, he'll be able to turn chukazu, this desire, v'chemdazu, and um, this a synonym for desire, this also this quest he has, latoya to good. And from that thing itself will become the good, hefech hara, the opposite of the bad. Kosher Bazar, like it says in Dor, Kib Esa Mabul. At the time of the Mabul, Hoyuim Lakabo Torah. If the people at the time of the flood had used the moment properly and done tshuva properly, so they could have received the Torah at that time. Evidently, they were at a very high potential level. The higher you are, the greater the fall. So therefore, since they fell much further, and they caused a tremendous disaster. But had they used their potential for good, they could have accepted received the Torah at that time. For Ya'az Moshe, and whatever this means, there was something like Moshe Rabbeinu at that time, where I guess Moshe himself could have come along, or somebody in the generation would have been like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Darshu Azal, like Chazal explained, and the pasuk says, "B'shagamu basar." That's what Lashon Hashem says about the generation of the Mabul, and why he promises he's not going to bring another Mabul again because they are flesh, and therefore they are weak, and therefore they have to have mercy. But there, the word B'Shagam, the Chazal point out in Gematria is Moshe. Pei Shin Gimel Mem is the same as Hey Shin Mem. So it's the same as Moshe because there could have been Matan Torah. My minor Torah, and the water also is a marshal for Torah. It's represents Torah. But they turned it into bitter waters, into treacherous waters, because of their sin. The Torah, on the other hand, which they could have gotten, is the purpose of the existence of the world, the opposite of the destruction of the world. Which the world's created. And had they used the moment properly, they could have turned everything into good. But they caused it to be lost. That period was prepared. Where did they have merit, where they have accomplished merit. So then, it would be the opposite of destruction. She read as made Torah, but rather waters of Torah would come down like Kimon to stay in the world. We also know that the Chazal have another mashal for this, which is at the time of the Churban, Mashiach is born. So again, this symbolizes that at the time of great destruction, there's a potential for great positive, and those are why you have always linked the very depths of despair, which the very height of hope. that time would have been prepared if they were married, if they would have married to become Mashiach and build the Beis Hamikdash for eternity. V'zeh tos anshi Yerushalayim. This is the mistake of the people on Yerushalayim and the Via Shek and the people, the false prophets. It's more at the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. Time the second Beis Hamikdash, Anshe Yerushalayim. The time first Beis Hamikdash is people or the false prophets. They saw that they foresaw that things are going to be good, and they weren't completely wrong. Had Am Yisrael done tshuva properly, so things would have been good, and it would have been a time of Geula, time of Yeshua. But the problem is that Am Yisrael did not use the time properly. They thought Hashem's going to do good for them. That's what the false prophet said. Hashem's going to bring us good, great stuff. Not the Churban. What they saw was not completely false. Had they been Zoche, so then that would have happened. Unfortunately, they were not Zoche, but that was the idea. So this is saying, which Tzadok is saying, which is, he says many times over, which is that there's always opposites. The higher you are, the greater you fall. The greater you fall, the higher you can get. So there always is this idea that a time which seems to be a time of great depths is a time which can be a time of great growth. Time which of great growth can also be a time of great depths. It works both ways, although he's only talking about looking at the positive, trying to use the negative for the positive, but also positive can be used for the negative. So that's why you find very often in history you have events like the Holocaust and the founding of the State of Israel, which come very quickly one after the other, because you can go very quickly from the deepest depths to a very high place, and vice versa. Go from a high place to a very low place. The question is how people use the potential of the time which they're given. Okay, the next is a very the piece is not a the next several pieces are not saying necessarily which are going to make us feel good. I involved maybe it was a feel good piece, but not Ein Zayin. It says Ein Zayin is a feel bad piece. It says Afilu Adam Gadol Yeser, even the greatest person, Yesh Bo Gam Mishpachto, if he has some problem in his family, in other words, there's somebody in his family who's not a good person, or there's some question about his yichus, and he's that big bow. You should not marry into the family. Even if he himself, because he's so great, it doesn't damage him. Yazik Lazar is going to damage his children. Now, I think Reb Tzadok was extra sensitive to this. I can't prove this, but I think he was extra sensitive to this because he was a Kohen. And being a Kohanim, I think, are much more into yichus than non-Kohanim. And he was sensitive to this idea that, just because a person is a big person, if he comes to a questionable family, then that could have impact later on, even if on himself it doesn't have impact. It's an interesting discussion in the poskim. If, of course, there's a pkam called Ben Hanida, not to marry somebody whose parents conceived him when he or she was in need, was a nida. In other words, the mother had not gone to the mikveh when she became pregnant. And the question is, does it apply in our day and age? Does not apply in our day and age. So Moshe says that it doesn't apply because we assume, okay, maybe the mother didn't go to the mikveh, maybe she went to a bath or she went swimming in some way, which if that is the rice, at least is the equivalent of a mikveh. And therefore, if you see that the person with whom you want to make a shidduch is a good person, so then you assume that they're not really ben or bas nida, that the mother wasn't nida when she conceived the child. Chaim Kanievsky says that if you see that it's like about tshuva and the person is a good person, then obviously you don't have the flaw ben nida or bas nida, so therefore you don't have to be concerned because you see they're a good person. But Reb Tzadok is saying, no, even if you see he's a good person, seems like a good person, you still should avoid it. Because if even that person is a good person, the person you think you're marrying, maybe it's going to affect your children. So therefore, you should avoid it no matter what. A certain I forget, I think who was there, who was talking about, but another person said, even if it's as great as Yeshua ben Nun, who was the second greatest person of all time after Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm not giving my daughter because you never get that how the children could turn out. Nevertheless, there is a point here which is made. That if this person like Yeshua ben Nun, I'm not giving my daughter, but not like Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, that would have been okay. Give his daughter to him was like Moshe Rabbeinu, even though Yeshua not. But poskim hochim is that the Oslo mark Moshe Rabbeinu. for poskim for proving this, that I'm not sure where the poskim say this, but he says you're not allowed to say that that even if it's like Moshe Rabbeinu, I wouldn't give him my daughter. I don't know where it says such a thing. We come time Yeshua the bar, but there's something here, a reason why they said even it's like Yeshua ben Nun, not like Moshe Rabbeinu, because there are people who can actually, even according to Reb Tzadok, who can get beyond the problem with their yichus, problem with their family, and overcome that, and that's not quite a problem. Moshe Rabbeinu love Hashem u'shorish Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu is the source of Torah. Mitzad Kesar Torah. And if a person has the crown of Torah, then ein l'chush mishpachos, is not concerned about his yichus. Because it says the Kesar Torah munach l'kol. The crown of Torah is available to anybody, and if somebody gets it, even if in other ways it doesn't come from a good background, he can be assume he's a good person. Visa, and it says, although this is not going to help you for marriage purposes. Mamzer tam chacham. You have a person who's a mamzer. In other words, absolutely not allowed to marry him because he's a mamzer. His mother and father forbidden to be with each other. Tam chacham kohenim, but it's a mamzer tam chacham takes precedence even over a kohen gadol who's an amoritz. And therefore, a person has a very high madrega that is completely Torah. He can do. There are things which that person can accomplish, which nobody else can accomplish, and which nobody else should attempt to accomplish. Moshe Rabbeinu that's what Moshe Rabbeinu accepted the Erev Rav. Even though Hashem was against accepting the Erev Rav, Moshe Rabbeinu, he was completely connected to Torah. He was, so to speak, even to overrule Hashem. And he was allowed to accept the Erev Rav. And the assumption is that Moshe Rabbeinu is at least partially successful in dealing with them. That's why they remain part of Am Yisrael, whatever the deficits might have been. Therefore, had this person been like Moshe Rabbeinu, it's my Talmid Chacham Gadol B'dor, he'll be a great Talmid Chacham among the greatest of generations. That would be like Moshe Rabbeinu. Chazal say Moshe Shaper Kamarta. When the Chachamim wanted to praise each other, they would say, "Oh, you're like Moshe Rabbeinu. You said good." So being like Moshe obviously is considered to be being like the greatest of the generation. He would have given him his daughter. Rak Yeshua ben Nun, but if he's only Yeshua ben Nun, it's not Tzaddik. Yeshua is a great Tzaddik. Bizarre de Yosef, he's from the descendant of Yosef. He wasn't technically the descendant of Yosef. Yeshua ben Nun was a descendant of Binyamin, but as we mentioned in the past, Binyamin and Yosef are interchangeable because they come from Rachel, and they're both Moshe b'Yos Elokim, and they're both. Anybody who comes from Rachel is assumed to have an advantage in their year Shemayim. Rachel is considered to have more Yer Shemayim, if we can speak about it, than the other Emos. V'amazal Chazal say, "Eiman being parnas latzibur," but so it takes it further. He says you should know that if somebody has Torah, so we have a principle about such a person. Eiman being parnas latzibur. We don't appoint somebody to be a leader of the community. Only can kupa l'chule, unless he has a basket of shrotzim, of rodents and vermin hanging on his back. Meaning, on the contrary, if a person is going to be a leader in the community, so then it's best to take somebody who has all sorts of problems, because then he'll remain humble. So, in fact, according to Tzadok, we just turned around. He said if a person has a Torah, has Yireh Shamayim, and is unique in this way. In other words, it's not that Yeshua ben Nun was unique too, but it has to be uniquely above Yeshua. So therefore, be somebody who has a mastery of Torah, not just Yireh Shamayim, then something like that could become an advantage to him, that he has questionable lineage, questionable family background. That makes him humble. The Namar says, "Be malachim, be malachu." In me, the kings will be king. In other words, if you have that connection to Hashem, which comes through Torah, so then you can become a king. They're more suitable. Like it says, people are humble. Literally means people of the sons of the poor, but here means people who are humble. They say Torah. If you have people who are humble, so then the Torah will come for them. Why is that? Why is Torah connected to humility? Why is connected to Torah to people who are poor? And here again, meaning poor meaning they come from their parents might have been amorasim. Their parents might have been totally ignorant. but they themselves have this powerful connection to Torah, kind of like the previous piece. The more ignorant the parent, the more possible that the child could turn around even and make an advantage and make connect to Torah. Because it's like when you shoot a bow and arrow. So the more you pull back on the bow, the further the arrow will go. So the more deficit there is, sometimes the more advantage will come from it. Ki melkam Torah dafka became shvurim. Because the place for Torah, not necessarily for Yiras Shamayim, which is a separate thing, as I said before, fearing God is separate than Torah. But the place of Torah is in broken vessels. So broken vessels means that people who are broken are more likely, because of their humility, because of their desire to build up, because of their coming from a low place, to be able to get Torah. And he brings evidence from this from Chazavi, Sortesh Bapera Akiva, the greatest Tan of all, the greatest of all the Baalei Tshuva, the greatest sage of the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, V'yishpachas Gerim, and he came from a family of Gerim. So when it comes to Torah, all bets are off. So Rabbi Tzadok has turned around completely from the beginning of the piece. The beginning of the piece, he said that you shouldn't to connect to people, even they're great people. He says, but that's except for Torah. If a person has Torah, becomes a Talmid Chacham, so then all bets are off. Then you can connect him and we get even Rabbi Akiva. Consider Meir Chazal say, the reason on Pascha Meir is because he was so brilliant, nobody else could understand him. They weren't able to understand what he's saying. There's a classic example that in recent generations is the Rogachover. There are others like him, but the Rogachover was well known. So brilliant. We don't pass on him because nobody can understand him. His mind worked on a level way above everybody else's. So we don't pass on people who are very, very great because they're above and beyond us. And that's an interesting idea in of itself. That Torah, the person who passes on has to be somebody who could be understood. Now you don't pass on people who are not necessarily understandable, even they're clearly greater than everybody else. So, but he also came from a family of Gerim. So therefore, we see that because somebody comes from a low place, it can go very far as far as Torah is concerned. Because Torah depends on humility. The more humble a person is, the more Torah a person can get. And so it says that the descendants of Kani, the Yisrael, the father of Moshe, Olamir Tvarim, they came up from the sea of Tmar, because Chazal say that they were members of Sanhedrin. And they were the people who recorded the deliberations of the Sanhedrin. It's not clear. Members of Sanhedrin, they recorded the conversations of the Sanhedrin, but they were very, very high level Talmidei Chachamim. So on the contrary, a person, even if it's a ger, and you would say, don't stay away from him. A kohen, of course, not even allowed to marry a ger, but you say stay away. But if they can be zochet to Torah, if they're zochet to Torah, so then they can be in a very high level, higher than somebody who comes from a normal place. If somebody comes from a low place. So the lesson, of course, of us is that if we want to be zochet to Torah, we have to be very humble. And B, that if we are humble, then we can get to much higher places in Torah. And that erases a lot of the other shortcomings which we might have because of our backgrounds or because of where we're coming from. Okay, I've gotten 2 pieces for today. This is great. And have a good rest of the week, whatever's left. Have a good night.